In this video, we're going to show you how to output your line item databases to a Word document using the Wizard's line item database settings. This is a two-part video. The second video will cover how to make your own custom tables. So this video is for when the Wizard creates all the output, the tables from scratch. So how do you determine which method the Wizard's going to use? That is determined by if you have created a template in the My Templates folder or edited the stock template for the page the category is associated with, and either inserted a tag for the Wizard to do the insertion of the tables itself, or if you're going to custom create a table for the Wizard to just drop content into. So we can just go into the preferences and go into the line item database. And you'll go to this Quote Templates tab. Now, this is all going to be based on the database we have selected up here. And we can go to Edit Quote Templates. There are no custom templates for this database in the My Templates folder. The stock templates will be used. So if you see this kind of message, you will know that the Wizard is going to be creating the output for you. And you can see there are no templates for this database. I can say show all my templates, and you can see QDB 13, 16, 17, 19, and so on. These are all custom templates that have been set up for other databases, not the one we're using. So if you uncheck this, it's going to show you templates for the actual database you're currently using. So since we have none, we know the Wizard is going to create the output for us. Now we can create a template and set it up for the Wizard to do the output. And we'll do that just to show you how this all works. So we can go to Quote Related Templates. And for the current line item database, it's associated with the cost summary in the invoice. So if I just highlight the cost summary and say copy to My Templates, what it's going to do is it's going to make a copy of the stock cost summary template, append the database code to it, and make a copy into your My Templates folder. So if you bring up your File Explorer and go to the default install folder for your proposal kit, which will usually be the C drive, the proposal kit folder, the proposal pack folder, and in there you'll find a My Templates folder. And this is the folder where all the custom templates are stored. So when we say, let's make a copy to My Templates of the cost summary for our currently selected database, it brings up all the categories in that database. So if I have all categories selected and I say copy and set up templates, what we can see is it just added QDB3 cost summary .docx over here. So if we just click open template, it's actually going to open this file. So you can just go to the My Templates folder using your File Explorer and just manually open and edit these templates. So the Wizard interface is just giving you another way of managing the files in this folder. So if we say open template, we can see what it did is it took the stock cost summary, it removed the headers, the footers, the design elements, like the cost summary header that's usually at the top of the page, because that's all going to get reapplied when your entire document is assembled. So our My Templates files are just the base body text of the document. So when you see the Q-quote tag, this tells the Wizard to completely insert and create the quote tables for every category that's associated with the cost summary, which in this case is the product and services category with a summary table. And it will replace this tag with its output. Now we can change this up a little bit. Let's say we only want the product category in a summary. Now you can see, instead of QQuote, it's added QQuote product cat, which is the code or identifier for the product category, in QQuote summary. So this way, the wizard is only going to output the products to the cost summary, not the services. You know, we can manually add this in if we just type with the keyboard, QQuote, and we see services cat is the code for the services table. Like that. So the wizard will then replace each one of these tags with an entire table, one for the product category, one for the service category, and one for the summary. The difference between using QQuote like this versus spelling them out individually is if every category that's going into this page has the same number of columns, the same number of fields, it will create one table for everything. If you split it up like this, it's going to create 3 individual tables with some white space, like a line or two between them. Now, if you have a category with different number of fields, even if you use the QQuote tag, it will cause the wizard to split it up into 3 individual tables. All right, so this is how we set up our templates for when we want the wizard to completely create the table output. So for right now, I am going to leave this as Q-quote, and I'm going to save it. So when the wizard builds our entire document, it will look in the My Templates folder first. If it sees a cost summary.docx with no database label, it will use it. If it sees a cost summary.docx instead with our currently selected database, QDB3 in this case, it will then override the use of cost summary with the database specific one. If it doesn't see any templates in the My Templates folder, it's going to go grab the stock cost summary from the library of the thousands of templates for the design theme. So we have our cost summary set up with a single tag to drop in the entire table. Now if I go into Edit Quote Templates, now you'll see an entry here for QDB3 cost summary.docx. Now another little feature is I can open this file with the edit button and say I want to, instead of typing with the keyboard, I can say view template tags. I got all the tags that can go into a Word document, and I can just highlight and click insert tag and template. And if I only have one Word document open, the wizard will know to insert at the cursor point whatever tag I have highlighted. So I can click the insert tag and template button, and you see it inserts that. So that just saves me having to type the whole thing out with keyboard and possibly misspelling something. All right. So we'll resave that. Now we just have a QQuote, so the wizard's going to do absolutely everything for us. So we'll go build a document with the stock settings so you can see what the output's going to look like, and then we'll go and make some edits using the available settings for adjusting how the wizard will create the output. So we've already set up a project. If I go into line item quote, Manage data. I can see I've got 3 lines in the products category, a few widgets. I've got a couple lines in the services category. And if I view the globals, I can see my subtotals, discount amount, shipping tax rate, total amount, grand total. All right. So if I do a test and preview, I can get a quick preview of what the cost summary is going to look like. Now, since I also have the invoice associated, it's going to output a preview of the invoice as well. So you can see here Q-quote, and it just replaced that with all its output. And we're going to focus just on the cost summary. So we'll just close this invoice. Now you can see how it replaced the Q-quote with a single word table with lines for the products, lines for the services, our headers, all of our amounts, subtotals, and all our globals. That doesn't look too bad, but what if you want to make some adjustments to how the wizard does its output? Say, what if we want to shorten things up and remove this major header, products, services, and summary, shorten things up a little bit. And what if we want a single word row for all the data instead of one table row per line, and that will help shorten up the size of the table. Now there are other settings, so we can say left justify all these labels over to this side. We can change the width of these, so maybe we'll change the width of the price column so we get some more space over here. All right, so how do we make all of these adjustments? So we will just go back out. I'm saving the project without building the documents, so I don't want to kick off the full document build yet. I'll go into my preferences, data and display, line item and quote, and basic product and service sales is the database we've been using. And I'm going to go into the edit definition. Now if I go into table settings, multi-table rows, that is checked, so that's what's going to cause every line item to have its own table row. So if I uncheck that, that's going to drop all the data into a single table row per category. Now if you have lines like say your descriptions that are going to overflow and wrap down to the next line, you're not going to want to use this option because your other columns will be misaligned. So do be aware of how your data is going to wrap if you're going to start changing this. No table header rows. So when I mentioned, hey, let's turn off the main chapter rows where it said product, services, and summary, you want to check that. That turns off those rows. Table width, you're probably not going to have to change that. Vertical alignment, space before and after, that's just going to adjust some little spacing in the cells. And summary label alignment. So you saw all of our summary labels were aligned to the right. I'm going to align those all to the left. Now, because we turned off these table rows, we don't have anything in the table that distinguishes the products from the services. It's just going to say description and so on in the columns. So I think we should probably go and change a couple line items. Now if we go into the categories, you can change the default alignment of the category labels, but we actually just turn those off. We can hide the display name in the table header, but we just actually turn that off. If I'm going to go into the category fields, so for product category it says description, I'm going to edit this field and I'm going to change description to products. And notice I have some other fields here where I can change the alignment, the column width, hide the label. We're just going to change the label. Now if I go edit the services category, change that description to services, now I also wanted to change this field width. So if I go edit the rate, I'm going to make this 50. And I'll want to go back to the product category, change that one as well. Change that width to 50. Now we've made all of our adjustments to the table output. And let's go preview this again. So this is how you can go back and forth, maybe multiple times, between changing settings and looking at the preview until you get your table layouts just the way you like them. And then when you're all done with that, then you can start building your final documents. So I'll go back into my project. Now, if you were building your project instead, the entire thing, you would wind up having to uncheck this locked for editing box you would see up here, delete the files, and rebuild the project again each time. Using the preview is actually faster, because it's only going to build a quick preview of the database enabled pages. Okay, so now we can see we got rid of these products, services, and the summary line. And this is the descriptions. We changed from description to products and services. You can see we have one table row for all the data. You can see how this column is now shifted over in length from when we left it from default to setting it to 50. You know, we could probably shorten up this. We could probably shorten this up a little bit if we needed more room over here in the description lines. Now, because we got rid of the summary line, we might want to go and change something in the subtotals, just so we don't have the subtotal here twice. Yeah. Maybe we could add a blank line or something. So it's up to you to how you're going to start adjusting all of these settings. But you can see that all those settings we changed have all been applied. And that is how you get the wizard to do its output and then change settings. So we'll go and do a full build of the final document. And we've selected 5 chapters. Front and back cover, an introduction, the cost summary, and the invoice. All right, the entire document has been built. We'll take a look at it. We're using one of our nature design themes. So we got the front page, introduction. Here's our cost summary. So now you can see in the final document, it's re-added design elements like the sidebars, the logo, the header, page numbering, footers, and so on. So that actually doesn't look too bad. You know, I think we would just make maybe one minor tweak here so we don't have the subtotal of the services right up against the subtotal for the services plus the products. We would just change one of these labels to something else. And that is all there is to making some changes to how the wizard does the table output. So make sure to watch the other video on how you can custom make your own tables if you need something more custom than what the wizard will output by itself with the settings that are available. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and click subscribe to keep up on the latest proposal writing tips with Proposal Kit.